very good evening. Welcome to the West Ham Weekly on the West Ham Voice on a Monday night. I hope you've all had a decent weekend. The result wasn't too bad, was it really? Given that we didn't expect anything from the game against Liverpool. 1 point gained or 2 points lost? I don't know. You make your minds up. But of course, everything that's going to happen between now and the end of the season, and beyond the end of the season, is all going to be about who's going to be our next West Ham United manager or our next West Ham United head coach. And the news there was a couple of stories out today about David Moyes, and Sullivan apparently is going to not make any decision until the end of the season. We've heard that quite a few times before. We've heard that there's going to be no plans until the season ends to have a discussion about what happens with regards to the managerial role. But the one thing that hasn't been made clear until now, it's been rumoured before, and I think one or two other channels have kind of alluded to it in the past about, it's not going to be a managerial role, but it's likely to be a head coach role. It's going to be what is the offer that's going to be made and to whom? The news today is that David Sullivan will indeed sit down with David Moyes when the season ends and talk about what happens next. And it's going to be, David, thank you very much. We'd like you to stay on and be the head coach next season. So you'll relinquish some responsibilities in terms of things like transfer deals, etc. And all you have to do is coach the team. And of course, that will determine what David Moyes decides to do moving forward. Now, don't get me wrong. I know there's going to be plenty of you going, oh my God, you're talking crap and Moyes is gone. He's dead. He's not going to be at West Ham United next season. But let's be realistic here. David Sullivan has alluded to wanting to keep David Moyes on before. In fact, I did 1 or 2 shows about it earlier on in the season. I think around halfway through, around about Christmas time, New Year, etc. And the preference is he wants to find a way to keep David Moyes at the club. And I'm guessing David Sullivan is thinking, well, the halfway house here is to keep Steiden happy, to keep Moyes on, is to offer him the head role coach. Now, to be honest with you, really, really honest, I don't think Moyes is going to accept that. When you hear Moyes talking to the press, when he's asked about his future, etc., he keeps talking about it's got to be right for me and it's got to be right for the club as well. And what Moyes will consider is, would he stay on at West Ham United if he's just a head coach? If all he's got to be asked to do is just to coach the team and nothing more than that? I think not. I don't think it's a goer. I don't think Moyes will accept that for 1 minute. But I think my understanding is that's what's going to be offered on the table when the season ends. Now, of course, given the fact that we know Moyes won't accept that, West Ham United obviously have to make contingencies. There's no denying that West Ham have approached other managers, other coaches, and sound them out. If the role's available, would you be interested? That's good practice. I think it makes sense. We've always said in the past, West Ham United don't act quickly enough, especially when it comes to transfers, etc. So when it comes to the new managerial role, head coach role, or whatever you want to call it, they're actually doing their due diligence, because I think they're second guessing that Moyes is not going to accept an offer of head coach. And that way, they've got to start lining up their ducks in a row, just in case he does turn around at the end of May and say, thank you, but no thank you. And my understanding is, despite all the noise about all the German manager, was it Hansi Flick, was it today? And, Amorim might be back on the agenda, etc., Paulo Fonseca, I got some news from what I was told about Paulo Fonseca later on as well. The one that's coming out tops is Julen Lopetegui. I only heard someone else mention it at the weekend. I thought I've been saying it wrong, haven't I? It's Lopetegui. So he's the one that's looking likely to be the front runner should David Moyes turn the roll down. Now, I know you're all going to bust a vein at the thought that David Moyes could possibly be retained at West Ham United. But the board, as I said, have made it clear before that, their intention is that they would like him to stay on. Do I believe that there was an offer made earlier in the season? Yes, I do. Do I think it was the right offer for Moyes? Well, clearly not, because if it was the right offer for David Moyes, he would have accepted it and it would have been signed and sealed already. And I think perhaps what's happened is, well, perhaps we all know. Wait and see what happens by the end of the season. Wait and see if we're still in Europe. Then we'll have the same discussion again, or another discussion again. I think Moyes was hoping if we stay in Europe, it strengthens his hand to turn around and say, well, hang on a minute. We're back in Europe yet again for the fourth season in a row. I want to stay as manager. Now that it's almost dead cert. I mean, we've got to have a lot of favours done for us. It's almost dead cert that we're not going to make Europe next season. Everything has changed, and it's no longer, David, the ball's in your court. You can dictate what you want. It's now, look, damage limitation. If you want to stay with us, I guess it's got to be the head coach role, David. And if he turns around and says no, then I guess that's why West Ham United are looking for alternatives. Now, where does that leave Steiden? I'm not so sure, to be quite honest with you. Maybe Steiden will get some of his way if Moyes or whoever comes in, accepts the head coach role. Then Steiden will have his job to do in looking out, going out, getting players, etc., what he's expected to do, helping to shape the club by having a head coach rather than the manager, etc. So there will be some Steiden influence there. But if Moyes, if Sullivan turns around and says, all right, David, let's keep you as manager for the next 2 years or whatever, I think Steiden will then definitely reconsider his position at West Ham United and think about moving on. Right. I'm going to talk about this later on, and I'm sure I'm going to bring in all your comments as well. So let's go into the chat and say good evening to you all. Wrong, usual. This is the new me, always on time. Good evening, Mr. Shios. How are you? The pig-headed so-and-so will take the head coach role to piss everyone off. To West Ham fans, to only the job he knows offered. West Ham job will be a Division 1 club. It's quite possible. I don't know. I don't think he will accept a role of head coach, to be honest with you. Good evening, Toho. How are you? Good evening, Apache. How are you? I sincerely hope Moyes' new role at the club is not head of youth development. Shaky, how are you, mate? I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. Good evening to you, Robin. How are you, mate? No more dinosaurs at the helm, please. Look, let me be clear. Let me be clear. I have come to the conclusion, by the way, that it is time for David Moyes to move on. When I look at the squad we've got left, when I look at how we played against Liverpool, look, all right, we got a point, but goodness me, 4 games left at that time. It was, we need to go all guns blazing to try and have that remote chance of getting back into Europe. Should have gone for it. We know we can. Now that we've seen the way we played against Freiburg, now that we've seen the way we played against Leverkusen, why keep that kind of performance only for European games? We won't have European games next season. So will David Moyes if he stays, will he treat every Premier League game next season in the same manner and go for it? I don't know. I really don't know. And I really do doubt it. Wayne, good evening to you. I hope you're well. Hope Moyes doesn't stay. Watching his style of football is sucking the life out of me. It might just be me, but I find watching it exhausting. It's painful. A lot of you, I think a lot of people say that. Look, did I enjoy the game against Liverpool at the weekend? I was watching it and I was thinking, if we go a goal up, it'd be great. And even then, when we went a goal up, I was thinking, can we hold on to it? I doubt it very much. Who else have we got? Good evening to you. Moyes out. 21-23. Late. See, I'm early. This is new me. I don't know if it will continue. But Graham, how are you, mate? The sun is finally shining in Alberta and Moyes surely has to go. Well, I'll tell you what, it was shining here and it was warmer today, but I've got the heater on again. It's cold tonight. Neil, how are you, mate? I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. Glenn, how are you? Moyes' narcissistic ego won't allow him to play second fiddle to Steiden and obey orders to play a more attacking brand of football, or has Moyes' phone been silent with job offers? Well, that's the other thing. People have suggested, well, if Moyes stays, he's going to be told, well, you've got to play differently. He ain't going to do that. There's no way. He might just go, all right, I'll be head coach. That doesn't mean he'll play a different brand of football, a different style of football. Woodhammer, good evening to you, mate. I hope you're well. Good evening to you, Ray. I hope you're well too. Woodhammer, evening all. Wouldn't be at all surprised to see Moyes stay. All of this hoo-ha about who will be the next manager. Wouldn't it be typical if it was Dave all along? It would be typical, to be quite honest with you. And I'm going to explain about Sullivan and what he expects from a manager, head coach, or whatever a little bit later on. Who else we've got? Good evening to you, Steve. I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. Mr. Tiny, how are you? Thank you for your message the other day. Moyes will not stay because Steiden will be in charge of transfers. He will be offered a contract as coach, not a manager, which will result in him leaving by mutual consent. That's highly possible. And I think, Steve, that's quite likely to happen if the offer that I'm understanding is to be made as head coach. Aaron, good evening to you, mate. There you go. Bang on time. Or was I a minute late? Who knows? Who else have we got here? I'm going to try and get as many people on tonight as I possibly can. Lee, how are you, mate? I hope you're well. Thank you for joining as well. Juha, how are you? See, I probably pronounce your name wrong every time as well, but I hope you're well, mate. Thank you for joining. Good evening to you, Richard. How are you? Thank you for joining, Mr. Evans. How are you? And good evening to you, Trodge, too. How are you? Who else we got? Infamy Junkie, Wasim is here. All the usual suspects. Good evening to you, Mark. How are you? I hope you're well. Mr. McCarthy, how are you? Use Hansi Flick. I just messaged you just before I went live. Don't believe all the rumors, mate. Hansi Flick, possible, but probably on a long list of other names that have been linked to us. John, good evening to you. I hope you're well too. Who else we got here? Mr. Lamprey, how are you? Good evening to you, Lee, as well. Steve, still, imagine if Moyes stays, the fan base will be even more split than it is now. I don't think it will be a good thing. I think I talked about it last week. I think the whole Moyes in, Moyes out thing has become so toxic, so frustrating that it doesn't matter anymore whether we win a game or lose a game. All people talk about is whether Moyes should stay or go. Doesn't matter what happens, almost doesn't matter what happens on the pitch. I guess maybe if we have 15 Leverkusen type games next season, if Moyes is in charge, maybe the thinking might change. But we know that's not going to happen. Even I have become resigned to the fact that we won't see that kind of football on a regular basis. Bill, good evening to you, mate. Billy Bob, you caress the like button. Thank you very much indeed. E. Davis, how are you? Look, by the way, I don't do it often, so I'm going to try and do it a bit more often. If you're new to the channel, if this is your first time, do hit the like button. Please do subscribe to the channel. Doesn't cost you anything. And also hit the bell notification to let you know when the next show is on. So please do that. E. Davis, how is the board allowing Sullivan to make these decisions still? Because he owns the club. He's in charge, which is, it's weird, isn't it? Because you've got Steiden there brought in, and we thought it was going to be, the birth of a new dawn at West Ham and how we do things in terms of how the club's run, the footballing side of how the club is run, transfers and the manager, etc., etc. And I just don't understand, why Sullivan is not. I don't know. I genuinely don't know if there's any conflict between Steiden and Sullivan about a new manager. I'm sure they must have had conversations. I'm sure they must have come to some conclusion as to which path they want to take. Hence, all the stories that are coming out about sounding out managers. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't misunderstand. When I say sounding managers out, it doesn't mean that they're going and offering them a new contract and all that sort of stuff. They're just saying, if there's a possibility of this role becoming available, might you be interested moving forward? That's not the same as we would like you to become our new manager, our new head coach. Quite a different sort of scenario. People wonder why the Amorim meeting didn't take that long, because there probably wasn't a lot to talk about at that point in time, because at that point in time, there's no job to offer because David Moyes is in role. Now, if David Moyes at the end of May has the conversation with Sullivan and says, no thanks, West Ham United already have an answer from Amorim as to what he might want to do moving forward. So that's why there won't be a long conversation of, well, how much do you want and what contract do you want? How much money do you want in the track? There'll be a conversation of, look, we're sounding people out. You're one of the targets that we're interested in. Would you be interested? So that won't take very long. Good evening to you, Richard. How are you? Hope the decision comes out before the season ticket deadline, as I want to change my seat. And if Moyes is retained, I have more options to choose from. Well, that's the other part of it. There will be a decision by the end of May, which now I think the deadline day for season tickets, is it the 3rd or 4th of June, something like that? So basically, we will know by the end of May whether Moyes is staying or not. Will we know whether we have a new head coach if he goes? That I don't know. I would expect that it won't be long after the conversation's been had before a new head coach is announced if Moyes leaves. Enough time for people to go, I best renew because so-and-so's in charge. Lopetegui, would people renew for that? I've got my reservations over Lopetegui, to be quite honest with you. I think there's a lot of good things about him, but there's a lot of stuff that resonates a bit of an old way of signing. What sort of manager we bring in at West Ham United, and he keeps the Pellegrini alarm bell keeps ringing in my head. It just feels a bit of a Pellegrini type approach if that's who it ends up being. Good evening, Bonnie. I hope you're well, mate. Trudge. Good evening to you. If that's true, Tim and Moyes must work well together. I think they actually, ironically, I think they kind of do maybe well. I mean, you saw that in the summer transfer window. You didn't see quite a lot of that in the January transfer window. There are rumours now, of course, that the reason why we didn't buy anyone, apart from getting Calvin Phillips on loan, is because we were keeping the money for a new coach this summer. Let's see how much money we spend if that's true. Flawless, good evening to you. If we finish 10th, there's an argument for Moyes staying. If we finish out of Europe, there's an argument for Moyes not staying, to be quite honest with you. Will 10th be a reasonable finish? At the moment, only Chelsea can overtake us. I mean, there was, I think, 2 weeks ago, there were probably 3 teams maybe that could have overtaken us with the number of games they had in hand over us. They all fluffed it. Of course, Chelsea's the only team now with 2 games in hand that could overtake us. And that would drop us down to 9th. I don't think we'd finish any worse than 9th. Is that a good reason, a good argument to keep him? I don't know. You tell me. John, Sully needs to sell up if he offers Moyes an extension. They will not sell any season tickets at all. And I did try to find out the percentage of season ticket sales earlier today. And I was told that the initial flurry was quite good, but it's low overall numbers of renewals. So they're struggling. They've got to get this absolutely spot on. Having a new... will a lot of people walk? Will they not renew their season tickets if Moyes stays in charge? I think a lot of people are threatening to do that, and you probably will get some drop off. But I think there will be a last minute flurry. I reckon maybe 70, 80% will still renew. I think, even if Moyes stays, because people will start thinking to themselves, well, hang on a minute. No European football, more Saturday games coming up, which suits more people rather than Sunday games. There'll be less money to spend in terms of having to go to European games and Premier League games, etc. And people might say, okay, perhaps we might do better with less games. Of course, we still need a decent squad to do that. So I think there'll be a late flurry. I think people will renew whether Moyes stays as manager, head coach or not. But will they get I don't know what we had last season. Was it something like in the 90% renewals or something like that? Will they get that many? Probably not. I reckon they'll probably get 80%, 85%, and they may have quite a bit of drop off otherwise. Darren, good evening to you. I'm sorry when I send messages when I'm here. Don't be sorry, mate. Absolutely fine, mate. Good evening to you, William. I hope you're well. Estelle, not another year of this shite football. I don't disagree. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not here advocating for David Moyes to get, a new role as head coach or anything like that. I've had my fill as well. I think it is time. Sometimes you just feel that the atmosphere around, other fans, my mates that we go to football with and all that sort of stuff, you kind of like go, yeah, it's time, isn't it? That feeling of it's now time. Many will still say he overstayed his welcome by another year. If you remember the same thing with Allardyce, that final season just took so much out of everybody, and it feels that way with David Moyes at the moment. Toha, I'm doubting. I'm like a doubting Thomas. I will not believe Moyes has gone until he is gone. Infamy. Sullivan loves to see fans divided because it takes a lot of pressure off him. That's a good point, but this is so crucial to him. This is so crucial to Sullivan. If he gets this wrong, it could hit income. All right, I know, and I've said it before, that season ticket income is not as vital as TV rights and all that sort of stuff, the overseas rights, merchandise, etc., but it's still money in the coffers. Jonathan, good evening to you. I don't know if what you say will or will not be true, but it would be a huge mistake to keep him. He will either lose revenue or there will be protests within 6 months. That's a possibility. The latter part of it is a massive possibility. If Moyes stays and we're doing really bad in the league, or we're averaging, or we're sort of like doing what we've done, playing against teams like Liverpool and affording them far too much respect and not going for it, and sort of being sort of like, a rare there or thereabouts, losing games that we should be winning, drawing games that we should be, losing games that we should be winning against teams that, like the Crystal, with the greatest of respect to them, like the Crystal Palaces, etc. There will be a lot of fan unrest, to be quite honest. I can see that. Neil, sorry, but the damage to image and prestige if Moyes stays, it's not going to happen. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Good evening, Mr. Brownie. How are you, mate? All well here. I hope you are too. Trodge. Sully will do the dirty on Moyes, true to character, break his word like Lingard for a profit. That's another interesting thing. One of the things that Sullivan did to Allardyce, if you watch the show I did last week about the sort of managers that Sullivan seems to like, he left it right until the end before he turned round to Allardyce to talk to him about any new contract or whether he was going to stay or go. And it seems he's, history's repeating itself when it comes to David Moyes. It looks like Sully is leaving it to the end. Look, there's an element of respect here. David Moyes is contracted until the end of until June anyway. So there's an element of respect. See the season out. I don't have a problem with that. Absolutely. But we need, Sullivan has got a small window in order to get this right. He's got to have that. I reckon the conversation is going to be. I've been told the conversation is going to be had at the end of May. I reckon it's going to be between the day after the last game of the season and before the end of May. So it'll be like a 2-week window, give or take, just over 2 weeks. The conversation will be had then. The decision will be made in that time, so that West Ham United can then go, right, now we know where we're going. So there's an element of respect for David Moyes to see the season out. But at the same time, a bit like the Allardyce situation, Moyes is kind of left hanging. We as fans are kind of left hanging. There's a lot of people that say, I'm not going to ring you until I know what's going on. And that's fair play. Good evening to you, Mark. Good to see you Saturday. I hope you're well, mate. Thank you for coming over and saying hello. John, Kalispera to you, Sarif. I hope you're well, mate. Good evening to you, Sharky. How are you? I hope you're well. John, I have some advice for the group. Do not go drinking with ex-players. I was out with Steve Lomas and Mark Ward on Friday night. I was dying the next day. Somehow Wardy got his 6 a.m. flight back. They're hardcore, mate. Philip, I hope you had a good time. Good evening to you, Philip. I really don't think he will get any offers to stay. Sullivan knows the animosity regarding Moyes and no chance of being here. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. And I'm sure Sullivan has probably got that in his head. But at the same time, Sullivan does like David Moyes. He actually does think of him as a decent manager. He's looking at the overall rather than just like, the bad times we've had, etc. And he's thinking to himself, David Moyes has done well for us overall. But But it's a good point though, Philip. Yeah, the respect and the animosity, etc., could go out the window. Ray Almiron apologized to sporting fans, but never said he wasn't leaving. He absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. He did make the apology. He did say it was ill-timed, but he not once did he turn around and say, that means I'm staying. So that door is slightly ajar. Now, of course, the thing about this is, as we know, as we found out several times last week, is that David Sullivan doesn't pay compensation to anybody to get a manager out of a contract. So it's going to be interesting to see if Almiron is still available. I'm beginning to think that Almiron might go, AC Milan are looking for a new manager. They were thinking about Fonseca. They were thinking about Lopetegui. It could be that Almiron could be one manager that they're also looking at as well. Toha, don't start pronouncing names correctly. I would not be happy with that. I like the stylisms. Barry, good evening to you. Moyes is so stubborn; he would not accept a head coach role unless the money is good. He is getting well. I don't doubt for a minute the money will change. It'll be the same money, but I'm pretty certain. Lopetegui is going to Milan. Well, no, he isn't. And all fan channels who voted said they don't want him. So surely not. Well, I don't know, mate, because that was the story at the beginning of the week. Now, that was the story at the beginning of last week. Come the end of last week, apparently AC Milan are calling on him. And that may not necessarily happen. Sharky, being linked to AC Milan. Let's scroll down. Vinay, I hope you're well, mate. I am preemptively Lopetegui out. He doesn't fill me with. He doesn't. I'm going to talk about him. I did a show last week and mentioned him, but he doesn't really fill me with like excitement. To be honest with you, Fox's Masuaku for manager. I mean, how low can you go, Billy Bob? No matter who the manager is next season, it's going to be a long journey getting a squad built up fit for purpose. The squad, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, how have we got here again? 4 summers in a row. This will be 4 summers in a row where we've had to rebuild. How have we got here again? It seems odd. Why am I not convinced? You did ask me that. And I haven't replied. I did a show. Look, I will promise you, I will do a show later this week about Fonseca. There was something about him that I mentioned in a show I did earlier in the year, which made me think, I like him, but I'm not so sure. But my apologies. I know you asked that question before, so I will do a brief show to talk about, some of the prime targets. Lopetegui, I'll compare Lopetegui with Fonseca, with Almiron, and with David Moyes. Woodhammer, getting so tired of hearing Moyes harp on about past achievements. If the man renewed his wedding vows, I'd be shocked if he didn't crow in 3 successive European qualifications. Paul, Moyes has wasted so much money in player valuation. Well, he's just wasted money completely. I kind of almost at the beginning of his second tenure at West Ham, I kind of sort of went, all right, well, these are players that aren't fit for purpose in terms of fighting relegation battles, etc. And I gave him the benefit of the doubt, letting the Andersons go and the Hilairs go. I wanted to keep Hilaire. But then he's done it again. You start thinking to yourself, hang on a minute. Scamacca being one of the latest ones where it was obvious that Scamacca was never going to fit a David Moyes style of football. And yet we went out and bought him and then we sold him for next to nothing. And now he's, revitalized back in Italy. That's no surprise, to be quite honest with you. Infamy, 3 matches this season that we've conceded 5 or more goals. Fulham, Arsenal and Crystal Palace. Trodge, Moyes needs to rehire the PR woman he used to have that rebuilt his image after the scandal. What scandal was that? You need to explain. Wasim, the likes of Fonseca or Hunas interest me. Otherwise, Eddie Howe, if he became available. If you saw the show last week, I said if there was one manager or one head coach or whatever it is you want to call the future person that will be at West Ham overseeing the team, it will be Eddie Howe. Eddie Howe fits the bill for both Sullivan, because Sullivan wants managers with Premier League experience, etc., safe pair of hands and all that sort of jazz. And then, of course, Eddie Howe would also fit the sort of the remit, I guess, that Stardon's looking for. A young manager, or younger than Moyes and all the others that we're linked to. A young manager, using the youth, etc., is going to work alongside him, to sort of improve the squad and so on. Eddie Howe fits the bill. King Robert, do you think with our current players we can turn into a possession-based team, or is counter-attacking football inherent in these players' heads? I think we can be a possession-based team. I think we've got the players. Here's the irony of it all. We bought a Gerd who's got good who's meant to. I remember doing reviews on a Gerd before we signed him, and I talked about his skills. And one of the skills was about the long diagonal ball that he had, but another skill was about possession football. He was comfortable in taking the ball out from defence into midfield and then moving it on to the midfielders, etc. So we got a player like him in, and we got other players that who are possession-based footballers, and yet. We defend and we defend and we defend. So yes, the answer is I do think we've got players that can that are good enough to be possession based, and we've seen it, haven't we? We've seen being on the front foot what sort of quality of football we can produce. We've seen it not just this season, but it's happened in previous seasons. So we know Moyes has got it in his locker. We know that these players have got it in their locker. And then I don't get when I see us being sitting back and allowing teams to dictate, etc. Right, let me stop there for a moment, and I will come back to all your other comments. But let's do a bit of a roundup on other things before we get back onto the Moyes issue. So first of all, match review. Right, starting lineup. Unfortunately, Mavropanos didn't pass a late fitness test, so Ogbonna was back in the team alongside Zuma. The rest of the team, I think, picks itself now, doesn't it? When you look at the bench, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, all right. Johnson, Creswell, who I talked about last week, I don't know why it took a week for it to come out, but I'm sure you've all heard Aaron Creswell's turned down a 1-year extension to his contract. Look, love him, 10 years at the club. But really, come on, people, we need a new left back or a new backup left back at the very least for Emerson, or bring through one of the youths, And Ward-Prowse was on the bench, Phillips, and then Ings and Mumbama. So you look at the bench and it's much of a muchness. Nice to have a few youngsters in there. Kalen Casey, promising young central defender. Mumbama, haven't seen much of him lately. Haven't seen much of him at all, really. But you look at that squad and you look at the number of players that are likely to go at the end of the season or just aren't going to make the grade. Ogbonna is likely to go, I'm pretty sure. I mean, people have talked about Ogbonna maybe being offered yet another 1 year, but it would be unfair on Ogbonna because we all love him, and the last thing we want is for him to come on and make a pig's ear of stuff because he's just not got the legs anymore. So we're looking at a number of players. Paquetá, I don't think Paquetá has been at the races for the last month or so. We know he's likely to go. I think the rest of that starting lineup is likely to stay. But then you look at the bench and you look at Johnson. He's refusing the new contract. Creswell, as I've already mentioned, Phillips' loan deal will end. Cornet's likely to go. Ings is likely to go. Mabama, where it's gone all quiet, is also likely to leave because he too has not accepted a new contract. I wonder how many of those players, maybe someone like Johnson, maybe someone like Mabama, are thinking, let's also see who the manager's going to be next season before I decide whether I want to stay or go as well. So starting lineup kind of, it picks itself, I guess. And look, like I said a moment ago, did I expect anything from the Liverpool game? No, I don't think any of us did. I don't think any of us expected any kind of the performance, 29% possession. I think we all expected that. The love that David Moyes has got for Liverpool, and Jurgen Klopp, and almost like, yeah, you take the ball, sir, you have it, let's watch you play football in front of us, and what we'll do is we'll defend to the hill. And that's the bit that I was watching the game, and I was chatting with my mates in the, in the terraces, and we're talking and watching, and there was things like, yeah, they're on the attack again, and it was like getting a little bit like, well, we know which way this is going. And then when we scored, it was like, oh, hang on a minute. Hang on, we've got a game on. We've actually gone in front. Great, well taken goal by Bowen, and we thought, okay, this is exciting. We've got a goal. We're on the up now. Then we started to play. Then we started to perform a little bit. And unfortunately, halftime came because I felt it. And I'm sure we all did. We've got a 1-goal lead. And I kept saying, please, Moyes, don't defend the lead. Don't defend the lead. Please don't allow them the space that they had in the first half. Don't defend the lead. What did we do? We defended the lead. It took them 3 minutes to get back into the game. And at that point, I thought to myself, that's it. Game over. They'll get another goal and that'll be it. They'll end up beating us by 3-1, 4-1 or something like that. And then when that calamity own goal went in, I mean, I don't know. It hit Ogbonna. It seemed to hit someone else. It hit... I think they gave it an own goal to Areola. I'm not sure how that materialized, but that was it. I think, a lot of people were already thinking, well, what time we're going to go to the bar? And then out of nowhere, one moment of magic, making that second goal and the way Antonio, fair play to him. The man I've been criticizing for the last couple of seasons because I thought to myself, he's finished. He's done the business again. He was excellent again, Antonio. And the cushioned header that he took was superb, absolutely superb. Did we deserve it? Maybe not. Do I give a shit? Not really. To sort of get one over on Klopp, and dent his hopes of winning the league. Fine by me, so long as Arsenal don't win it. I don't care. So look, despite the lack of possession, 29%, we had 7 shots on target. They had 9, but they did have 24 shots overall to our 9. Jared Bowen returning was absolutely superb. He's been, don't we miss it? It's really ironic, isn't it? When we were missing Paqueta at the beginning of the new year, we were all saying we're not winning games because of Paqueta, but it's Jared Bowen that makes that team tick. All of a sudden, we're a completely different team when Bowen is back in the team, and it was great. And I've got to play Kudus. I think Kudus. I think you've got to praise him for trying out on the left. It's not his natural position, but he was trying his to do well. I think I was harsh in my review after the game on Soufal, and I've got to take that back. And I've got to say, Soufal did his best, but I think what I was alluding to is when Soufal's up against pace, he kind of struggles. But fair play to him, he tried to hold his own. Ward-Prowse, when he came on, Ward-Prowse actually changed the game for us because all of a sudden there was a bit more coherency in our passing and our movement, etc. He kind of knitted it all a bit better together. So look, great. Look, did we drop 2 points or did we gain 1? Given the fact that I thought that we weren't going to get anything out of Liverpool, I think we gained a point, to be quite honest with you. So where does that leave us? Well, we're still 8th in the league, of course. It is a tall order now to sort of finish. 8th might just get us European football, dependent on what happens, above us, etc., etc. But look, Chelsea, they're 2 games behind, 2 games in hand over us, with only a point behind. Now, they play Spurs on Thursday. If there was ever a time I wanted Spurs to do us a favour, it's this coming Thursday. Do I care where Spurs finish? I don't give a shit. If they beat Chelsea and keep them a point behind us, then on Sunday, when we go to Chelsea and play them, who knows? If we beat them, all of a sudden, we're 4 points ahead of them. If we beat them, if they lose against Spurs on Thursday, and then if we go out there and beat them, all of a sudden we're that bit closer to maybe making European football. It's going to be a tall order though, but let's see what happens. What other news have we got? Well, let's look at some loan news because look, some of our loan players have done extremely well. Not only did he get supporters player of the season, but Freddie Potts at Wycombe Wanderers also got players player of the season at the weekend. Absolutely phenomenal. Really, really well done to him. He's been great. Potts has won the most tackles in League One of 89. He's had the most interceptions of 56. Second most passes completed of 1,246, and the second most take-ons, 26 in that league. Well done. This is what we want from our youngsters. We want our youngsters to go out there and prove that they're good enough. Look, all right, Wycombe lost at the week. Did they lose? No, they won against Charlton and they finished 10th in the league. So well done to them. And Potts has been integral to that. And this is what going out on loan is all about. Going out on loan, making a mark for yourself, and then coming back next season and saying, here I am. This is what I've done. Start using me. So fingers crossed that goes down well next season, whoever's in charge. Further up in the Championship, Flynn Downs came on as a second half substitute against Stoke City, but they lost 1-0. And mathematically, that ended their hopes of automatic promotion into the Premier League. So it looks like it's going to be playoffs for them. Other players out on loan. Dan Chesters came off the bench for Salford City, and they shared the spoils against Harrogate Town. On loan keeper Mason Terry, who picked up also Supporters Player of the Season at Concord Rangers, but he was on the losing end at the weekends at 2-0. And in France, now I know what you're all going to say. See, we should have kept him. Well, I don't think so. But Saïd Benrahma, he scored a goal and he made an assist in their 3-2 win over Thilo Kehra's Monaco at the weekend as well. Do I think that if Moyes goes, that the likes of Kehra and Benrahma will come back to West Ham? I'd like to see Kehra come back. Would I like to see Benrahma come back? Not really, to be quite honest with you. Right, how about some injury news? Well, we know we've got a couple of players that have been out, and both of them central defenders. Naifer Gerd, it's quite possible with the injury that he's picked up, we may not see him back before the end of the season. We've got 3 games left, and it's quite possible he might be, back maybe for the last game, but it's looking unlikely to be back against Chelsea at the weekend. But Dinos Mavropanos, as I mentioned earlier, he had a late fitness test against Liverpool and only just failed. So we expect to see Mavropanos back in the team this coming weekend. What other news have we got? Well, let's talk briefly about the women's team. Very briefly, Shannon Cook got a well-deserved equaliser against Aston Villa at the weekend, which meant that West Ham United women's team survive another season in the Women's Super League, but they've been effing poor because they're going to finish second from bottom. The under-21s finished their league season with a 3-1 defeat at home to Leicester City, which was a little bit of a surprise, to be quite honest with you. However, now I didn't realise this, and maybe a lot of you may know this. Now the league goes into sort of a cup knockout sort of competition, like a playoff style competition. And given that we finished second, that means we're highly seeded in that, and the playoff ties will be played as from the beginning of May. So look out for details on that as well. So let's go back, shall we? Actually, you know what? Before I do, let's put in a few more comments, and then we'll go back to the topic of the day as to whether David Moyes is staying or not. Let me turn this heater off because it is getting quite warm with all the lights and everything as well. So let's where should we go? John, just read Paqueta might stay. I presume he thinks Moyes is off despite agreeing to join City. Well, let's get this right, John, mate. He hasn't agreed to join Man City. Now, this is an interesting thing. I don't know how many of you know this, but the clause, the release clause in Paqueta's contract is apparently only valid for a month. Now, I think it's the month of June. I don't know the exact dates, but I think it's valid for a month from when the summer transfer window opens. Now, if a team comes in and offers £85 million, matching the release clause, then West Ham United are obliged to allow Paqueta to speak to that club. Or if that deadline passes, afterwards, a team can come in and make a bid, whatever bid it is. Might be higher, might be lower. And then West Ham United would be able to turn around and go, well, no, he's not for sale. We don't want to let him go. It doesn't matter how much your bid is. So that 85 million apparently is only valid for the first month of the summer window being open. Now, he hasn't agreed to go to Man City. There's a high possibility now that he won't go to Manchester City. There's talk about Paris Saint-Germain being interested in him, because I can't see Man City paying £85 million for Lucas Paqueta this summer, to be quite honest with you. I think his value has gone down. I don't think he's had a good season at all. I think the first half of the season was pretty decent, but I think the second half of his season, all right, he came back from an injury, etc. I don't think he's had a very good second half of the season at all. And the irony is, people are talking about, well, he's been moised. It's because he's been moised, being made to defend and playing out of position. The irony is, for the last few games, the last month or so, he's been playing in the central. Kudus has gone out left. So Paqueta has been playing in his ideal favoured position of being central. And it ain't worked. It ain't worked. Ironically, I think he was better when he was playing out left and cutting in than he was playing central. Chewbacca, good evening to you. I hear Moyes has taken over as head of NATO. NATO heard he loves defence. Who else have we got? E. Davis, get Fonseca in. He is the best realistic option and his experience. Right. I said I had a story about Fonseca. So here it is. Apparently, excuse me one sec. Apparently, Fonseca's agent has said that West Ham United have ignored their advances. Apparently, West Ham United have not returned any communication with Fonseca's agents. Is that true? I can only tell you what I'm told. Do I believe it? I don't know. I think that's a bit odd, to be quite honest with you. But it seems to suggest, if that's the case, it seems to suggest that David Sullivan's head is elsewhere in terms of who he might want or who he wants as a replacement if David Moyes leaves. And it seems that Paulo Fonseca is not that person. Trudge, we need Mourinho to unlock Paqueta and make him feel a million. No thanks. If you're talking about low block football, he's the king of it, isn't he? He's the master. He almost created that style of football. So Mourinho for me, no. Daniela, surely David Moyes won't stay due to the fan base reaction. I can see him going back to Everton there with a new stadium next season, etc. I don't think Moyes really gives a flying F about what the fans think, to be honest with you. I think he's too stubborn and too proud to give a damn of what the fans think. So I don't think it matters to him. I think if he thinks it's right for him to stay, it won't make a difference. Good evening, Hamilton. I hope you're well. I think Moyes will go and end up in the MLS. We need a fresh outlook on the way forward, not dated football. Agreed. That's an interesting MLS. I think Daniela's more accurate that he could possibly go back to Everton. Arrive 66. If Moyes stays as head coach, he would do so with a massive grump on. Tactics will stay the same. Players will continue to be destroyed, and the new players will struggle for game time. Youth will leave. Yeah, don't disagree with that. Vinay, I think Marco Silva is a good choice, followed by Fonseca. Do I think Marco Silva is a good choice? Possibly. He's got Premier League experience, I guess. So, yeah. Anthony, good evening to you, mate. Thank you for joining in for me. I'd love to see some players from the youth squad get more quality first team minutes next season. Well, if you remember what I talked about last week in the West Ham Weekly Show, then I talked about the need to up our homegrown talent. Let me just go back to that thing I put earlier on. If you look at that squad, more or less, the players that we've currently got. Now, how many homegrowns have we got in there? All right, we don't have a full squad of 25, but if you've got a full squad of 25, 8 of them have got to be homegrown. We don't know what's likely to happen with Antonio, whether he stays next season or not. So there's a bit of a question mark over Antonio, one homegrown. Johnson is not renewing his contract. That's another homegrown gone. Creswell, not going to stay on. That's 3 homegrowns gone. We've got Phillips is going to go back to Man City from his loan spell. That's 4. And there's question marks over Ings. That's 5. Another question mark over Mbama. We could lose 6 homegrown players at the end of this season, which means that we're going to have to get homegrowns in. We're going to have absolutely no choice but to get homegrown players in. And, maybe, just maybe, one or two of the youth squad could make it through. I mean, Marshall is highly thought of. I just talked about Freddie Potts, highly thought of. I would love to see Flynn Downs come back to West Ham. He's had a great season at Southampton this season. That could be 3 homegrowns back in the squad next season straight away. Flawless, you're very, very welcome, mate. Thank you. By the way, I said it earlier, if you are new to the channel, do hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell notification. Subscribing doesn't cost you a penny, but it will certainly help me. So welcome, Flawless, and thank you for getting involved as well. Paul, time for a change. The handbrakes on the buses are worn out. Trodge, Man United shown it's hard to find a manager, and they got for the best CV and most expensive options. It is hard. You know, there are managers out there, but they've got to be the right. Dean, good evening to you, mate. We're all well, mate. Thank you, and I hope you are too. Steve, Stel, you got plans at some point to do phone-in shows? Yes, when I finally get the equipment. It's going to be in the next season now, but absolutely, I promise I will get the equipment. I've got a bit more money put by with all the sort of money, that some of the donations that have been made, etc. And so, yes, I'll do it in the new season. Mark, Moyes will leave, and he will hope we fail with a new coach, and then he can say, "Told you to be careful what you wish for." Infamy. Marshall, Mabama, Scarles, Earthy, Orford. There are other young players who think we should get some first. Out of those, Marshall, I've got bit high hopes for. Mabama, I don't think he's cut the grade. Scarles, I'm not sure yet. George Earthy, he's made a few games, hasn't he? The only reason why he wasn't on the bench was because of when you get a knock on the head, you've got to have several weeks off or several number of days off. But Earthy's another one. Absolutely. So we've got a number of players, young players, that could maybe be knocking on the door next season. Jean-Claude, good evening to you. If Moyes gets a contract, then all hell will break loose. Don't disagree with that. Mark, this is dragging out too much. Any new manager appointed will be delayed. Well, like I said earlier in the show, the conversations will be had as soon as the season's ended, and they want to conclude it by the end of May. If it is Moyes, they want to conclude it and move on. If it isn't Moyes, they will. That's why they're sounding out a number of people at the moment in order to have that as a backup. You know, my gut tells me they're going to offer Moyes a head role coach. Moyes is going to turn around and say, you can stick that where you, etc. And that's when they'll then turn around and look at the options. And Lopetegui is the one, my understanding, to be highest on the list of replacements for David Moyes. I've seen articles, Darren. It's all about money, and the football and us are totally different. Rowley, watchers, good evening to you, mate. I hope you're well. Moyes out, still holding out a slim hope for Amorim, but Fonseca, Flick, or Marco Silva will do for me. Not a huge fan of Lopetegui due to not playing the kids, but that's just me. No, it's not just you, and that is one of the things. I mean, I did a thing on Lopetegui. Well, why don't I talk about him a little bit loud? Let me go to my notes and talk about Lopetegui. So, the couple of things about Lopetegui. First of all, is the one thing he's going to expect is a very big salary, and this is why this smacks a little bit of the Pellegrinis for me. I think personally, I could be completely wrong. What do I know? But I think Lopetegui's best days are past him. I said this in the show I did last week. I think, he's been at big clubs and, he's won things, or, his reputation has gone well. That the Seville side he put together a few seasons back, who did extremely well. They won the Europa League and so on. I've got a feeling that his best days are past him. A little bit like Pellegrini when he joined us as well. He's going to want a massive salary. He's going to want to bring in an entourage of his own backroom staff, which means a whole load of change there. Pellegrini did the same. In all honesty, most managers or most coaches are going to likely to want all their backroom staff as well. So that will disrupt things. Where does that then leave the likes of Steiden? I don't know. Will he want to have the same sort of control as David Moyes wants as manager? It's quite possible. But the thing about the youth, I don't know, because I did talk about, in the team that he had at Seville, he did have a mixture of younger players as well as, experienced players as well. And some of the younger players he had went on to be sold to other teams, for a handsome price. etc. So in that respect, I don't know. He's also managed the under-19s, Spanish under-19s team who won the Europa Championship under him, and also the Spanish under-21s. They won the Euro Championship as well. So he's got experience of working alongside young players. He knows what they can offer. So I'm not 100% sure whether he will not use youth. But I think it's all the other things. I think his best days are past him. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think, he's going to want a massive salary. He's going to want to bring in his own entourage. And it just smacks of a little bit of the Pellegrinis for me. I'm not 100% convinced that he would be the right sort of manager. Now, his style of football, it's a 4-3-3 style of football, which I guess is all right. And it's also, he's adaptable in games. One of the things that you can sort of argue goes in his favor is when the team is under attack, he reverts that to a 5-2-3 or a 5-3-2 formation. We're on the attack, it's a 4-3-3, etc. It's an attacking option. But again, I just don't know. There's that big question mark for me whether Lopetegui is really the right sort of person to take us forward. Ryan, Moyes has taken us to where we are now, and I'm grateful. But if it is clear he has hit his ceiling and we need a fresh approach moving forward, when he goes, I will say thank you for the lasting memories. That's how I'm feeling now, Ryan, to be quite honest with you. I'll never forget the 3 years that we've had in Europe. The trips that we made with, going to places that I wouldn't have thought of, like, where was the semi-final in the Europa Conference League last season? Places that I wouldn't have thought of going to, and it's been absolutely superb. Will that happen again? I don't know. One of the things about potentially being out of Europe next season is that it means that we'll just focus on domestic competitions and the domestic cups in the Premier League. That might actually do good for us. It might sort of give us the strength to sort of like go higher in the league because we haven't got the distraction of Europe. But I'm with you. I'm kind of like, thank you, David Moyes. It has been absolutely superb. But is it now time to move on? Obsidian. My money's on Fonseca currently, but I still have hope for Amorim. Well, like I just said a moment ago, apparently no noise on the Fonseca front. Gary O'Neill will be a smart choice, although he doesn't seem to have any luck as a manager. He's constantly getting screwed over by VAR since he became manager. You could say the same for us. We've had a few screw-ups with VAR, haven't we? But O'Neill, I'd like to see O'Neill do the same at Wolves next season to show consistency rather than it being a one-off. I think he's a promising young manager, but I'd like to see a little bit more of him before I'd say, yeah, O'Neill. Good evening, Clive. I hope you're well. Listening in the background, please don't forget, thank you very much. Please don't forget to tap the like button. Jonathan, if we move forward with more of the same, I think a lot of wives will be getting their husbands back if they like it or not. Moyes in, and then it'll be me out. Infamy. Trudge, which two of the players I mentioned do you think have quality? I don't know which ones you're talking about. I'll leave you to have that discussion. Let's scroll down. Who else have we got here? Glenn, good evening to you, mate. I hope you're well. This whole Moyes saga has got disaster written all over it. The decision should have been made long ago, not let's sit Moyes down end of the season after his hollybobs and ends up saying no. I get what you're saying. I understand that. I really do. But out of respect for him, I kind of get why the board are doing it the way they are. But I totally get your point. Why leave it to the last moment? Well, like I said earlier on the show, that's probably why we're sounding out several potential alternatives if Moyes does turn around and say no. Vinay, this is a Gary O'Neill for me. I'm not so sure about Will still. I think we have the emotional because he's a West Ham fan and all that sort of stuff. Do I think you got to look at, he's done all right in France, but he's got a mid-table team there in the French league. So if that translates, does that mean that he won't do much better in the Premier League at West Ham? I'm not too sure, to be quite honest with you, if he's right or not. Hammerett, Floppy Loppy is not that different to Moisty. Want to need a whole different approach to our style for the sake of our youth and us. Who's Floppy Loppy? Lopetegui is not different to Moyes. Who else have we got in here? Stephen Gold. I wouldn't even trust Moyes to run a brothel, let alone a club. Mark. They will renew if Moyes stays. They will just sell their tickets for each game till he goes, as they won't want to lose their seats, surely, or the points for away games. Good evening, Epic. I hope you're well. Still, a lot of people have lost their passion for football because of Moyes. He simply needs to go regardless of what the other options are. I get that point. The thing is, though, the board will be looking at it in a different way. And I did say that sometime before as well. They'll be thinking to themselves, overall, 3 seasons in that. I know you've heard it all before. It's 3 seasons in Europe. If we finish in the top half of the league this season, maybe next season, without the distraction of Europe, we might do better in the league. They'll see it in a different way. Now, I'm not saying that their way is the right way, because I'm with you. I think, a lot of fans have lost their passion. We go now for the banter rather than being overawed by what's going on the pitch. Daniela, Stel, did you see that the Premier League clubs have agreed? Yes, I read it late today, and I was going to try and make sense of it. Now, my understanding of that, if people haven't seen that, the Premier League have agreed to the new ways of FFP, the way it works, which kind of like looks to balance the difference. I think clubs lower, correct me if I'm wrong, lower earning clubs can spend a bit more proportionately. I think that's the gist of it. And I think teams like Man City and I think Liverpool and 1 or 2 others didn't agree to it. But apparently Arsenal, Spurs, West Ham did agree to this approach. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's the gist I've got, that they're going to change FFP so that proportionately, in order to level the playing field, clubs who earn less can sort of like spend more of the percentage that they get in the club, something like that. Our Premier League 2 team is pretty fragmented at the moment. Marshall looks rusty when he left us, was flying, top scorer in the league. Yeah, look, it'd be great for the under-21s to have won the league and all that sort of stuff. But it's, for me, I think you're right. I think biggest shame about Marshall and the loan spell to West Brom. I was like really excited when he went there. I went, look, we got a player that's going on loan to a championship team. That really bodes well. And he didn't get a look in, which was such a shame. Vonnie, I'm going to renew whether Moyes stays or goes, but hanging on. Maybe the club will offer a discount to renew. Don't bank on that, mate. But that is the thing about, do you renew, do you not, because of the manager? Each to their own. But for me, it's like I support the team. I'm going to go and watch West Ham United, good, bad, or indifferent. Yes, of course, I want the football to be exciting. Yes, of course, I want to be on the edge of my seat. But I still go. I still renew. And I'll still go to away games. And I'll still go to home games and stuff like that. I will renew, because I'm a fan. That's not saying that anyone that doesn't renew is not a fan. Everyone's got their choice. But for me, it's like, yeah, I'm stupid enough to follow West Ham regardless whether we get beat 6-0 or win 5-1 or whatever it may be. Daniel, Moyes won't stay. He'll be told the style of football to play. He won't. And he'll be told what players he's going to work with. Possible. Plus youth. No. Now that's not Moyes. That's not Moyes, period. Let me go through that. So he'll be told the style of football to play. There's no way on earth that anyone will turn around to David Moyes or any manager or any head coach and say, you can stay if you play this style of football. Forget that. If he's left, if he's kept on as manager, head coach, whatever it may be, he will determine the style of football. He'll be told what players he's going to work with. Well, kind of, because if he becomes head coach, it will be Steiden and his entourage that will be looking to bring players in. Whether David Moyes uses them or not is another matter. Plus, work with youth. If he doesn't pick them, he doesn't pick them. He can't be forced to do it, and he won't do it. And we know how stubborn he is. So you got elements in there, Daniel, that I accept. Things like about what players he'll be working with. Because it will be Steiden. If Moyes becomes head coach, it'll be Steiden looking at the transfers, etc. But style of football, nah, he ain't going to change that. Bringing in youth players, no, unless he thinks they're right, he ain't going to do that either. But certainly the squad that he may have available to him. And if you saw this season, the beginning of this season, where he was kind of like not hesitating, but easing the likes of Alvarez and Kudus into the team. And it's when he realized they've got something they can offer That's when he started to play them regularly. And that's what Moyes will do with any squad that he's given. It'll be like, okay, let's see what you can do. And when they kind of convince him that they're good enough, he'll start using them regularly. So that element of it, I agree with. Style of football, I don't think he'll change that regardless. DiCanio, good evening to you. I hope you're well. What are your thoughts on the reports of social media of sightings of Steve Bruce embarking last week? Could he be the new manager? Well, I was at lunch with him yesterday and he said he wasn't interested. So, no. Gary O'Sullivan. What about Gareth Southgate? Presuming he leaves England's job, then again, would he be another Moyes-type manager too cautious? I mean, out the fire into the frying pan, or whatever the saying is, out the frying pan into fire. Much of a muchness, really, isn't it, Gary? I mean, interesting. He will be available, won't he? Would he be the sort of manager that Sullivan will go for? Yes, ironically, a bit of a safe pair of hands. Let me go into that because I was going to talk about, this kind of the managers that Sullivan likes. So let me have a look at my notes. So what kind of manager does David Sullivan want? Premier League experience without a shadow of a doubt. Whether it's Premier League experience in managing other teams or Premier League experience like Slaven Bilic in the past, who played in the Premier League. Preferably a portfolio of a manager having won something. Again, I did this in my show last week. I did a show last week to talk about our past managers to give you an idea of what I think David Sullivan is thinking. And he brought Avram Grant in. He brought Avram Grant in because he got Chelsea to Champions League final. Not because of Avram Grant, it's because of what Mourinho left for Avram Grant to work with. But I think in Sullivan's mind, it was like, oh, we need Avram. He's successful. The likes of Allardyce, safe pair of hands. You knew what you were getting. Pellegrini, another one, Premier League experience, and he won something. So for me, Sullivan, when he's probably thinking or being thrown all these names at him, Hansi Flick and Amorim, etc., his first train of thought is, have they managed in the Premier League? Oh, they go over there for the minute. I don't know about them. I only want to talk to managers. I want to talk to people who have got experience, managers in the Premier League. So Premier League, and that's why Lopetegui, unfortunately, kind of, ticks a box for David Sullivan. Preferably a portfolio of having won something. Lopetegui has won the Europa League, a so-called safe pair of hands. Lopetegui has actually done. He had a lot of credit when he managed Seville. He'd actually created a pretty decent team there. All the attributes, basically, those are the sorts of things that David Sullivan is looking for, which is why, when we talk about Amorim, we talk about Fonseca, Gary O'Neill, etc. Gary O'Neill, like I said, Sullivan will be looking at O'Neill and going, well done, mate, but let's see if you can do that consistently before I even think about giving you the job. Sullivan will keep an eye on Still. If Still ever comes to the Championship or the Premier League and manages another team and does all right, then he'll be a contender in the future as a future West Ham manager. But as it stands now, he's fixated, Sullivan. Sullivan is fixated by having someone with experience, with sort of like a stature about him. And Lopetegui, whether we like it or not, seems to tick quite a few boxes for David Sullivan. And that's why when we're looking at all these names that are being suggested, I'm thinking to myself, I'm not so sure that Sullivan is going to buy into this. The Amorim thing as well, as has been said last week and by several other people, he won't pay compensation for a manager or a head coach to come from one team and come and manage West Ham. It'll cost about 15 million euros, something like that, or 15 million pounds. I can't remember which one, to get Amorim out of his contract. Now, maybe Amorim, did they win, by the way, at the weekend? Did they win the Portuguese league? I don't know. But Amorim, he won't pay, especially given that Amorim doesn't have Premier League experience. So he's won the Portuguese league, but nothing more than that, nothing in Europe, etc., etc. So for Sullivan, again, it's like, put that player over to that side. I'm not so sure about him. And the kind of managers that I think Sullivan is thinking of they've got that kind of pedigree. They've got that stature. They've won something. They know the Premier League, and Lopetegu's kind of ticks all those boxes. But so does David Moyes, which is why I think at this moment in time, it seems to be a two-horse race between whether it's Moyes staying, accepting the new head coach role, or if he turns around and says no, Lopetegui is head and shoulders in Sullivan's head and shoulders above all the other potential candidates that might be around to manage West Ham. I love to be wrong. I really would. I'd love for it to be, I love, out of the blue that we hear at the end of May that Amorim is coming to West Ham. I'd love it. Or I'd love to hear about Fonseca, maybe someone like Fonseca. Marco Silva, Fonseca and Silva for me are kind of 50-50. I'll do a show later this week and talk about them in a bit more detail and maybe convince myself that they're the right kind of people, the right kind of coaches that should be managing West Ham. But Sullivan has got it in his head, the kind of person he wants, stature, winning something, Premier League experience, etc. And Lopetegui, I'm afraid, at this moment in time, seems to ring a lot of bells. Gareth Southgate could also be another one. All right, he hasn't won anything, but he's come close. Look, whether you like him or not, and his style of management, etc., he's come close with England, hasn't he? And he gave us England fans something to dream about as well. Getting to a final hadn't happened for a number of years, etc. And yes, quite possibly, Gareth Southgate could be a contender. Phil, I agree. Even if Moyes stays, there'll be a lot of last-minute renewals. It's easy to say on a chat room, not renew him, but come the deadline, all different. John Potter, evening to you, mate. Can't stomach Moyes anymore, and Sully should just let Steiden do the work, do his magic. Sorry about the spending. Oh, no problem, mate. I understood you, and that's all fine. But yeah, Steiden, wasn't he there? Isn't he here to do just that? That's what we all thought, to help shape the footballing side of things, because boy, oh boy, does it need it. Good evening, Hammerette. I hope you're well. Good evening to you, Sammy. I hope you're well. Sanj, here, new to your channel. Thank you very much, mate. Please, I'll say it again. If you're new, do please hit the subscribe button. Costs you nothing. Hit the like button, also helps. And also hit that bell notification, because it'll let you know the next time a show is on, whether it's live or pre-recorded. And welcome, Sammy. And thank you for getting involved in the chat as well. Who else have we got? Sharky. Still, have you heard about the Brazilian forward Wesley Kosova? We've been linked with an £18 million bid. I'm not talking. Yes, I've read the stories. I thought he was left. Aren't we going for a Brazilian left back? Or am I mistaken? To be, you know what I'm like, Sharky. I can't be asked, no disrespect to you, but just generally, I can't be asked to talk about transfers when we don't even know who the manager's going to be. So do we know who we're going to get into? No, we don't, because we don't know which direction a new manager or new head coach is going to take us. Now, having said that, that's what Steiden should be there to do. Absolutely. But unless we've already got a head coach in place who's going to agree to the kind of players that Steiden is looking at, and then I can't see much element of truth in stories like that, to be honest. Andrew, the problem is if Moyes is told he will go at the end of the season, he's nothing to play for, but he thinks he can keep his job, he will try to win. Good point. Good point. I do. And it's only when I halfway through that I realise I've read something that perhaps I shouldn't have done. It's all good though. Andy, if they haven't made their mind up about Moyes now, what difference would another 4 games make? It's ludicrous. I think they kind of had made their minds up, Andy. I think what they want to do is offer him that, what's come up here? No, don't need that. I think they're going to offer him the head coach role. He's going to turn around and say no, and then we're going to move on. David, is it true that there are 2 different deadlines for season ticket renewals? What are the dates? Sort the renewal for per month is tomorrow. No. The deadline tomorrow, my understanding is, if you're an away season ticket holder, if you've got that golden ticket, an away season ticket, you've got to renew by tomorrow in order to retain your away season ticket. If otherwise, if you don't have an away season ticket, then the renewal date is beginning of June. Please forgive me. I think it's the 3rd or 4th of June, something like that. I hope that helps. Infamy. Sullivan is to be one of the most short-sighted owners in the Premier League, if not right at the top. Don't disagree with that. either. Adam, good evening, mate. I hope you're well. I hope, thank you for joining, mate. Appreciated. Trodge, who paid for Amaroon's plane? We didn't, apparently. We need to know after Sully's coach whining. No, apparently we did not pay for it, is my understanding, despite what was rumoured to have been said before. Michael, the glue between Sullivan and Moyes is related to the adage that like attracts like for like. Yeah. Good point. Tony, good evening to you, mate. Story that we have offered Creswell. I did that last week, but I'm happy to repeat it this week as well. I said in last week's show, he was offered a 1-year deal. He's turned it down. And that's fine, to be honest. With the greatest of respect to him. He's been here for 10 years, 34 years of age. Why is that coming up again? Don't reboot. I've got all my... my other laptop with all my notes is just effing well rebooted. So I'm going to wing it from this point on. We need to get the manager in before we get any players in. We need to see what spot on. Exactly. Hammerette, I like Fonseca, would bring some exciting football and use the youth that are good enough. At least we know who is good enough because they'll be given a chance. His age himself is a concern, though. He's in his 50s, but it doesn't matter how old you are. You know, if you're going to use youth, it doesn't matter how old you are. Who else have we got here? Trini, I hope you're well, mate. Thank you for joining. Creswell even getting an offer. It shouldn't have happened. You know, there is even rumor that maybe Ogbonna might be offered another year as well. That shouldn't be happening. You know, people are talking about rumor that Fabianski is being offered. He's already been offered it. He's already taken it. That's the second extension. So he'll be here till he's 40. That's just not the right way to go. They're great servants for West Ham United, but your ageist squad, you know, I think now we're the oldest average age of something like 30 and a half years old, 31 years old, something like that. Gary, such a defensive manager. Why we let in over 6? That's the biggest irony of all, Gary, to be quite honest with you. The fact that he is a defensive-minded coach, the fact that he does effing well do a low block and tries to defend a lead or defend a 0-0, and yet we're not good enough to defend a lead. Right, that's come back. Give me 1 second, people. Let me just lock back into that. Right. It's the massive irony of it all. Let's scroll down. George, what's wrong with DM going on about his past achievement? What's wrong with DM going on? At least he's had them. No one denies him going on about, you know, we've achieved this, we've achieved that. But I think fans now want to look forward and go, that's fine. But are we going to continue achieving it? We're going to be out of Europe. You know, I'm sure perhaps maybe this weekend we will know that we'll be out of Europe if we don't get the points that we need. I think we're almost definitely out of Europe anyway. There is still a slim chance. But no one should deny him, you know, talking about past achievements. But we now want to know what the plans are moving forward. Trini, how far behind am I? Good Lord, quite far. Only want a possession-based team if the possession is progressive, not just backwards and sideways passing. Infamy. Does anyone else think Paqueta has regressed? Absolutely. Despite the injuries, absolutely. I hope he doesn't end up another Felipe situation. What else we got? I think he's gone. I think in terms of where his head's at, I think he wants to leave West Ham now. Maybe he thinks he's too big for us or whatever. He tries to be respectful, but at the same time, he's got to do his talking on the pitch, and he's kind of lost it a little bit on the pitch, to be quite honest with you. Let's scroll down. I'm going to try and catch up, so do forgive me. Do forgive me for maybe not covering all your comments. Finai. Predictable season with a non-existent January transfer window. The small tired squad, it was like watching return of the Flintstones. We knew it was going to happen. I said it was going to happen. Many people, said it was going to happen. That not doing decent business in January was going to come back to bite us, and it's done just that. Creswell is an experienced squad member. Might want to keep him around to bed in the 8 or so new players. No, it's time I love him, but time for him to go. Tony, our season is over, so announce Moyes is off so we can say thanks at the Luton game and the players can look forward to no Moyes ball next season. It's a really good point, actually. What are we going to salute? What are we going to celebrate? Who are we going to say goodbye to come the Luton game, given that we've still got one more game after that against who will then be champions, Man City. So, yeah, it's a shame that we're not going to actually be able to say goodbye to him and sort of applaud him, David Moyes, for what he's actually brought to West Ham United. Sharky, I guess Ben Johnson wants to leave. A lack of game time has probably frustrated the lad. Apparently, it's all about the contract. Apparently, we're not offering him the right contract to stay on. I don't know what he's being offered, to be quite honest with you, but surely we can't be that far away. But I don't know what he wants. Apparently, he's going to Crystal Palace at the end of this season. Dean, if he stays, we might just as well close the academy as he simply refused to bring the youth team through, or he will give them 3 minutes when we're 4-0 down. George Earthy is a case in point where Moyes was happy to use him because he thought he was that level good enough. And not Kudus, Mabama as well. But unfortunately for me, Mabama just hasn't quite shown what we thought he was going to be capable of. Earthy, though, look, Moyes is careful with youth. There's no denying that. But I think Earthy could make it, even if Moyes stays next season. Woodhammer, Paqueta's temperament has let him down. He can't sort that. If he can't sort that out, then he may be destined to always be the bridesmaid and never the bride. And I'm wondering sometimes, just sometimes, there are certain players who are better off in a European league. Like, he was all right in France, and maybe if PSG are really interested in him, he might fare an awful lot better. The temperament there is completely different. They like watching players rolling around for half an hour before the referee gives a free kick and stuff like that. David, I went to the game thinking that we may have a chance because Liverpool played a few days before, but it was West Ham that looked more tired, sitting behind the ball. Second half, always concede. Yeah, it's the way I felt, unfortunately. Robert, good evening to you. The team needs a total rebuild. West Ham doesn't have a squad to compete in Europe. Plus, if Moyes is still around, there is no youth playing. Well, I think he will play youth if he genuinely thinks they're good enough. When I think about the youth players that we've got, do I think any of them can make an impact in our team? I think Earthy was an interesting decision. Mabama, unfortunately, hasn't quite shown what he's capable of. I'd love to think that Freddie Potts now next season, after he's had such a great season at Wickham, could come back and try. We need a backup for Alvarez. When Alvarez gets his 18 yellow cards each season. No, I'm being facetious, but we need a backup for Alvarez. Maybe Freddie Potts is that. Maybe Flynn Downs. All right, Flynn Downs didn't come through our youth system, but maybe Flynn Downs is that as well. I think there may be one or two young players that could potentially break through next season. Let's scroll down. Infamy. Wait, is Kehrer still on loan or did Monaco make him a permanent transfer? Totally forgot about him. He's still on loan. I don't know if they've got an option to buy him, but he could come back. Benrahma, still on loan. Again, I think they've got an option to buy him, but I'm not so sure about Kehrer. Winston, why would the board offer Moyes a shit new contract? If the board is given a new contract, that's it for me. The virus cannot stay at the club, not as a coach or anything else. Well, we might have to accept, we as fans have no say in the matter, but there's a possibility that he'll be offered it wouldn't necessarily be a crap new contract, but it will be more about being just head coach, probably on the same money. Trotch, people running right past a Gerd, don't care if he passes it well out with the right. He's not proven to be as good as I thought he would be. Trini, Paqueta has not agreed to join anyone. There is a short-term release clause. Said it earlier. If an offer comes in, he'll be able to take offers. He has actually made a few comments on this. Absolutely spot on. The offer, the 85 million clause is for a month, about a month. So the summer window opens on the 14th of June. So it will run for 1 month. If a team comes in and offers 85 million in that time, West Ham United are obliged to allow Paqueta and his agents to speak to whatever team makes the offer. When that passes, and if a team comes in after that 85 million clause goes, if a team comes in and goes, we're offering 70 million, West Ham can turn around and go, on your bike, we're not interested. You're not going to talk to the player. So the difference being, if you want to pay 85 million pounds, we were welcome to talk to the player. If you don't want to offer that, we're not obliged to allow you to speak to the player. Now, of course, there's still the betting scandal that's looming over everyone's heads. Paqueta's agents have turned around and said, if this is not sorted out, we'll take the FA to court. We'll force their hand. So one way or another, it looks like that betting scandal, they've either got to charge him or drop the case against him, or the charge, or the potential charge against him. Trod. A Gerd suffers from same problem as Kera, can't handle physicality. People power past them both. Yeah. Fair point. Conan, I can't see Pep going for Paqueta. He loses the ball way too often, which is part and parcel of his flair style. You can't coach that out of him and have the same player. I'd argue that if he did go to Man City, Pep Guardiola would coach that out of him and still keep his flair as well. You look at the players that have at Man City, all the flair players, they're grafters. They'll graft. Pep Guardiola won't allow them to come in and do all the fancy skills. He's got an army of players that do all the fancy skills, but at the same time, they've got to graft. And Paqueta, I agree with you. I don't think Paqueta will go to Man City, but if he does go there, he will have to change his style. Hammerett, did you see O'Hara actually say that off the back of the season, Rashford should be in England side instead of Bowen? Bullshit. The Shadow Collective, good evening to you. I know who can help us and become the new man at the helm. Big Sam to the rescue. Yeah, that'll go down well. Trini, Moyes is hoping for a miracle and we can qualify for Europe. One more defeat and I'm sure there will be an announcement. That's a good point. Yeah, let's see what happens. If we lose, I've got a funny, but then I always have the half glass full scenario. I've got a funny feeling that Chelsea might lose against Spurs and we'll get a result out of them, maybe a win. And then last two games of the season, Luton at home. You know what will happen? We'll beat Chelsea. We'll beat Man City. And the 3 points that we needed, we'll lose against Luton. That's what will happen. Infamy. Moyes will hate the MLS. I watched the MLS and defense is not high. That's true. Yeah, not high on their agenda. They want to change the rules, don't they? So they don't have draws and stuff like that. Trini. Grealish would have to stop diving, as many have pointed out, when occasionally our players do it. His only use is conning free kicks out of officials. Who? Grealish. He's better than Paqueta at getting free kicks, though, isn't he? Keith, hello, mate. How are you? Que l'espero to you. Filomo Diganis. Hola, alive. How do you stop? Sorry, I'm late. No problem at all. My sister phoned 5 minutes before kickoff. Oh, dear. You should have said, call me back. Stell's on. Michael, Gideon Kodua is another of our young loanies at Wickham, captain of the. He's a fantastic. I think he's an unsung hero. I think Kodua is the player that made our under-18s tick last season. I think really highly of him. He's finally started to get more game time, despite the fact that it's tail end of the season now. Well, the end of the season now. But I agree with you, Michael. I think Kodua is a fantastic young player, unsung a little bit. Seems to be not talked about as much as the Ollie Scarles is and the George Earthies, etc. But I like Kodua a lot. Mallard, good evening to you. Amorim isn't off. I don't think either Fonseca or him I will take. Amorim isn't off. Off where, mate? Sorry. You mean coming to West Ham or isn't leaving Sporting? I don't think either Fonseca or him. You would take either one of them. I got you now. Sorry. I like Amorim more than I do. I don't know. Maybe it's because I just don't know enough about Fonseca to be able to give a proper argument as to whether I think he should be West Ham manager or not. But from my understanding, he seems to be quite a well thought of coach. Chewbacca, a head coach job, that makes no sense at all. He would still play the same round. Yeah. Like I said, Absolutely. Makes no odds. You give him head coach, head tea lady or whatever it is, the style of football is not necessarily going to change. Someone said earlier on about, he'll be told to play different style of football. He'll be told to use the youth. No, he won't. If he's made head coach, he decides the tactics. He decides the style of football. He decides who he's going to pick, etc. The only thing that he may not have at his disposal is choosing who we buy in the transfer market. Trodge. Our form stopped when Ogbonna got injured. We were looking real solid back then with him and Zuma. The irony, though, Trodge, is he didn't get injured this time. He was dropped, because I agree with you. We were playing really, really well. We were playing really, really well. And then he got dropped because a Gerd came back from the AFCON and Mavropanos was given a chance. Apache, nearly right. Lopetegui. That's what I said. I was saying Lopetegui before, so this is a lot better. Lopetegui. Hey, look, you know me. If I don't say it not wrong. Good evening to you, Mandy. How are you? What a nasty haircut. Hey, that's insulting. I hope you're well. Dexter, good evening to you. Hi, mate. I'm very well, mate. I hope you are too. Hopefully the season doesn't peter out. I think Fonseca would be a great appointment. I saw when Lille played Villa over 2 legs and they played great football. A lot of people are saying much the same thing, mate. Stephen, good evening to you, mate. I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. Mr. McLaren, how are you? I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. Charles, who's not for you, mate? Prefer Hal, but I can't see Newcastle sacking him. If they don't make Champions League, remember the conversation we had at the weekend? I've got a gut. My gut tells me that if Newcastle don't make Champions League, I wonder if the board will keep Eddie Howe on. I will bite your hand off to have Eddie Howe at West Ham United. Montana, mate, how are you? Still, who's the favourite for the position? Why is Sully so adamant it's Lopetegui? Fonseca is the one for us. I have a hunch. I explained. I'm sure you caught it, about Lopetegui's experience. He's won something. He's got stature, according to Sullivan, etc., etc. And I think that's why Lopetegui is the favourite if David Moyes doesn't accept a coaching role. Mark, still, if we get a new head coach that wants us to play higher up the... I'm going to have to guess the rest of that, mate. Vonnie, sorry. Disappointed about Fonseca if it's true. If we dither, though, someone like Man United will come in and nick him, quite possibly. If that is true, from what I was told, for those of you who didn't catch it, from what I was told earlier this evening is that apparently we're not responding to Lopetegui advances, let's say, which is rather odd, really, if that's true. Stephen, not getting excited by any of the names mentioned so far. What about let's do a vote on this. Who would like, just tell me just put the names, when I get down to them. Who's your preferred alternative? Or is David Moyes your preferred alternative? Your point about Amapus, why would we arrange talks with him if we aren't prepared to pay the release fee for him? I don't know, mate, is the honest answer, Chewbacca. I really don't know. But my understanding is, okay, from my understanding of how it all turned out, Steiden arranged the meeting. They met, they talked briefly, and then that's it. Now, someone mentioned earlier when he did his apology to the Sporting fans, he didn't say, I'm staying. He just apologized. It was ill time, wrong timing, and all that sort of stuff. But he didn't say anything about his future. So it's interesting. Dexter, realistically, and the safe option would be Potter? No way. For me, it would be a mistake, Graham Potter, to be honest with you. Sorry, Dexter. But if we have ambition for Europe again, then I would show ambition to pinch a top manager out of work currently, but options are limited. Potter, for me, it feels like, not just because of what happened at Chelsea, and I know he did a reasonable job at Brighton, but the understanding is Potter worked, I've said this so many times, so do forgive me for those who have heard it before. Potter, for me, works to a formula that's been created by the club, which is why De Zerbi came in and picked up where Potter left off, because there's a system in there. They've got a director of football who goes out and buys the players. They've got a formula for the way they play, etc., etc. And basically, the head coach has to fit into that formula rather than the head coach delivering a different sort of style, a different approach, etc. That's why when Potter came out of that system, he died a death at Chelsea. And mind you, poison chalice, Chelsea. Charles, we need a big rebuild of the first team next season. Will be a big season. Whoever's in charge, I totally agree. And maybe, just maybe, being out of Europe might be a little bit of a blessing in disguise. Alfonso, Will Still is not even in the conversation. Moyes is going, anyone think different? I don't think Will Still's right for us, to be honest. I think it's a nice, he's a West Ham fan and all that sort of stuff. But for me, I don't think Will Still would necessarily be the right option at this point. Jonathan, the new FFP thing makes no sense. If not in Europe, you can spend 85% in Europe. You can spend up to 75% and there will be a multiplayer. Let me start again. The new FFP thing makes no sense. If not in Europe, if you're not in Europe, if your team is not in Europe, you can spend 85%. If you are in Europe, you can spend up to 75%. Times there will be a multiplayer for all teams based on the lowest teams in the league's revenue. Didn't understand that last bit, but I agree with you. If you're in Europe, you can only because you're going by European FFP rules, I guess. Let's scroll down. Apache, West Ham are delighted to welcome back Arthur Masuaku as the new head coach. Trini, I have and always will support West Ham. Players and managers come and go, and fans are always here. Mark, I was season ticket waiting list for years. I will always renew. The club will be around a lot longer than any manager. Plus, it's my days out with family and friends. So true. Dexter, again, blessing in disguise, possibly with one game a week next season to start under a new era with a project in place, or would it be a deterrent in holding us back from progressing? What do you think? I do think, I do think. Look, if we get the manager, the head coach selection right, by not having Europe as a distraction, that's the other thing about Lopetegui. Apparently he wants a team in Europe, so I don't really understand why Sullivan thinks he's the next best alternative to David Moyes. But anyway, one season out of Europe could, we've got a rebuild to do, and look what happens. You've got a rebuild as well as Europe, etc. It can be quite a lot. And we suffered last season. We did another rebuild last summer, and then our league form suffered, even though we did well in Europe. So yeah, I do think it'd be a bit of a blessing in disguise. We're going to have to get 7 or 8 new players in anyway. As a minimum 6, as a minimum, even if we do bring a few youth players in, but they've got to also adjust and acclimatize, etc. So you've got a big rebuild. Not being in Europe will give us that opportunity to sort of settle, just focus on the Premier League, focus on domestic competitions, and it might be a blessing in disguise. We might end up finishing a lot higher in the league because we don't have the distraction of Europe. Tony, Southgate, please no, is going to cost you pommies the Euros in the summer. Well, it might do, might not, never know. Southgate wouldn't play Bowen. You're probably not wrong. Hamret, is it such a massive ask for us to want a head coach that puts out some decent attacking football, to get a striker that fits and scores, to have defenders that can run? Doesn't seem a big ask to me. Easy, Hamret, easy. Let's scroll down. How far behind am I? Still really far behind. Stephen, Southgate has wasted the richest crop of talent in decades for England, and he's hardly beaten anyone decent. He's up there with Neville, Gerrard, and Lampard for me. Do forgive me, people, but I can't put all your comments in as much as I try. New coach has taken us to the top, and who would that be, Bill? Who would the new coach be? Who else have we got here? Hammerit, Trudge. A dodgy, bent-up, rusty, corroded cog in the wheel is still 100 times better than Sully sticking his Russian beak in. Don't you like Sullivan, then? Matthew, have we offered Ings a new deal? Please? No, not as far as I've heard. We haven't. Alan, the old adage, you can't beat experience, is crap. Our team is full of experience, and we continue to get beat. I think Ings has got one season left on his current deal rather than being offered anything more. Toha, we could not say goodbye to Fornals due to the internal F-ups. Yeah, true. That's a shame as well. Matthew, I'd happily take a quiet mid-table finish next season with no Europe as long as there is a visible new project rebuild on show. I wouldn't, because if we're out of Europe, I want us to be competing for top 6 place, to be quite honest with you, because we won't have that distraction. Excuse me. In all honesty, if we are out of Europe next season, I'm expecting us to compete. I'm not suggesting we'll compete top 4, but I certainly want us to look at really finishing strongly and competing for a top 6 finish, to be honest with you. John, not being able to say goodbye to Moyes is the funniest thing I've heard in ages. Imagine 63,000 people shouting taxi. Come on, give him some respect. Victor, I think Sullivan has handed Moyes a new contract, but the terms don't suit Moyes, who wants full control. Starting to have more power next season. He will be Moyes' boss. And this is kind of what I started the show talking about. I think, I said before, has there been an offer made? I think there has been. Has it been accepted? Clearly not. I think they're both playing chess, aren't they? Moyes is like, wait. Let's see where we're at the end of the season. Then we'll talk about that contract that's been offered. Because as I said earlier in the show, Moyes has said it's got to be right for me as well as the club. It's got to be right for me as well as the club. So he clearly thinks that what's being offered is not right for him. He seems to think it's not right for the club either. And it is quite possible, as you said, Victor, that it'll be, well, not possible. I said earlier in the show, it'll be a head coach role, which means that Moyes will have to relinquish some responsibilities like the transfers, etc. Steiden's not come in just to sort of like, walk around flying off in jet planes and stuff. Steiden's come in to do a job. And one of those jobs is to build a squad. It's been evident now. I gave Moyes the benefit of the doubt in the first full summer transfer window when we seemed to need a rebuild. I was like, here we go again last summer when we had to do it. And now it's like, really? Third summer in a row that we've got to rebuild yet again? What's going on? And there is one common denominator in that. With the greatest of respect to him, it's David Moyes. The fact that we don't have a decent young squad. Let's also get this into perspective as well. We're not a sort of club. We're not a football team that are able to have 30, 40 million pound players sitting on the bench. We won't be. We're not that team. We're not a Liverpool. We're not a Man United. We're not a Man City, where if you've got a 100 million pound player sitting on the bench, biding his time until he gets game time, he accepts it because he's at one of those sorts of clubs. So we've got a balancing act to make here. We need a really, I think we've got a very good first 11. I think we need to replace one or two, but on the whole, we've got a pretty decent first 11. We need a striker. We need a left-sided attacking player. Definitely. We need another centre-back. I think we need another right-back. So there are, players. But if you look at the players that are currently in those roles, if they're on the bench, if Soufal is on the bench, if Zuma is on the bench, you'd go, yeah, all right, they're on the bench because there are better players in the first 11. And then you'll go, yeah, Zuma can do a job as backup. Soufal can do a job as backup, etc., etc. But at the moment, we've got those players as first team players. And we're not that sort of team that can go and get, another 4 or 5, 30 million, 35 million pound players and say to them, you're behind Soufal for the right back spot. You're behind Zuma for the centre back spot, etc. Those players, if you buy them 30 odd million pounds, they're going to expect to play. They won't want to sit on West Ham United's bench, and when we sort of have a go at Moyes and everybody else about why did Ben Rama go and why did Fornals go, that, as much as they weren't used properly to some extent, Fornals played on the left. The poor lad, wasn't his rightful position, but they would also turn around and go, hang on a minute, I want to play. If I don't want to be on West Ham's bench, I think I'm too good to be on West Ham United's bench. If, for argument's sake, Fornals went to, I don't know, Liverpool, he'd probably be happier to sit on Liverpool's bench than he would be on West Ham United's bench. We're not there yet. We're not there. So we can't have a squad of, say, 18, 19 outfield players, all worth a lot of money, biding their time. They won't do it at West Ham. So there is a balance to be made here, and we will go out and get 5 or 6 players, 7 players maybe in the summer transfer window. But there will be players that will be leaving. Paqueta, I'm sure, will go. I think Agurd will go. 1 or 2 others will go to create that space for them to come into the first team. And then we will have certain players who are currently first team players sitting on the bench, if that makes sense. We're not big enough for it. I wish we were, but it's going to be a really interesting balance this season. We do need a new squad. We do need a new team. But it's going to be an interesting balance to see how that turns out. Tony, can't play a kid for 5 minutes, then just cast them aside. They need playing time and a run of games. Don't disagree with that. Good night to you, Darren. Thank you, mate. Much appreciated. Anthos, good evening to you. I'm very well. Any decent manager will get lots more out of Benny and every player. Benny, no. Fornals, yeah. If he was played in the rightful position. Ben Rama, I wasn't too disappointed to see him go. Matthew, can you imagine another season of Moyes ball with no Paqueta? Good grief, crikey, well, in all honesty, I think we might be better off without Paqueta. The game we played against Leverkusen, he wasn't in the team. We seemed to be an awful lot better. We were moving the ball faster, etc. No one was doing all their trickery and all that, losing the ball in dangerous positions. Neil, does anyone seriously believe Moyes is capable of coaching a squad? One-dimensional, predictable relic. Hammerit, I honestly believe the only way City can get Bowen is if they do a swap deal. They can't spend money. Surely they're not going for Bowen. We won't sell Bowen. He won't go there either. Kevin, I hope you're well, mate. Thank you for joining. Steve, Kudus looks like another Rio Coca to me. I like Kudus. I think interestingly, I think when Paqueta does go in the summer, whoever he goes to, I think Kudus will actually start playing centrally, which is the position he prefers to play. Bill, saw the documentary. He came across as a good lad with a great family behind him. Who? I don't know, because you must be answering to something else. Sharky, did anyone see the James Collins interview where he mentioned that he had a Barney with Andy Carroll who basically knocked him out? This happened when they were both at the club. I didn't see it, but that interesting story. Jonathan, Eddie Howe contract is up at the end of the season. Not this season, next season. I could be wrong. I'll try and look it up quickly. Similar to Moyes, just depend if they renew it. Oh, now you got me thinking. Bear with me, people. Let me see if that's right. I thought it was the end of next season. So let me quickly look it up. It won't take me long. So how transfer market. Eddie Howe and his contract is up. No, it's not. Doesn't say. He was only appointed in 2021 as coach. There is no end date on this, but I think he was given a term of 3 years. I think it's the end of next season. Oh, you got me excited there, mate. I think it's the end of next. I'll be delighted if I'm proven wrong. Anthos, shame as we missed out on Chelsea's Palmer. Do you think the ditherer was dithering again? No, Palmer turned us down, mate. What a shame, eh? But he did. He turned us down. The offer was made. It was put in there, and he turned us down. Well, can't win them all. Middle-aged cyclist, good evening to you. Hansi Flick and Steinen together could build something special. Yeah, it's possible if we were going for Flick, but my understanding is we're not. But that could change. Ian Knott, it's easier to say who I don't want. Potter, agreed. Cooper, agreed. Lopetegui, agreed. Moyes, agreed. Bill, too much noise around Amorim. All points to him for definite. Could it happen? I don't know. Early doors. Evening to you, mate. I hope you're well. Thank you for joining. How far behind am I now? Not far. Getting there. Do forgive me for not putting out all your comments. Bill, without the disappointment of not beating the pub teams by more, won't be missed next season. Well, what pub teams do you mean? Crystal Palace, they're playing really well now as well. Anthos, be careful what you wish for. Hammer it. I really hate that expression. Makes one settle for crumbs rather than the real deal. What else have we got here? Infamy. Wouldn't be surprised to see Ings play in Turkey in a couple of seasons for other reasons than just football. I got what you mean. He's going bored again. He must be well pissed off. Ian, I like Amorim. Not sure about his media stunts. Fonseca looks good to me. Seeing him in a few videos explaining topics and positions. Then one-on-one relationships with the club says a lot of good stuff. I'm going to have to look him up properly and do a proper show on him. Nando, I agree with the distraction of Europe, and with the right coach who can rebuild with youth, I can see a positive outcome for the future. Morning from down at good morning to you. Thank you for joining, mate. Really appreciated. Jake, Moyes ruined our season at Newcastle away with his defensive subs. Yeah, God, we fucking had that game won, didn't we? We had that game won. Eric, still, we have a manager that didn't know how to use Scamacca. He's the striker we need now. I disagree. I don't think Scamacca was the right player for us. You know, I remember, again, when I was doing a review about him, when we were linked to him, and I was comparing, I was saying, Scamacca, all his details seem to suggest he's more a Haller-type footballer than an Antonio-type footballer. Given that Moyes, we know the type of front man he wants in a team. You know, he wants an Antonio. He wants an Antonio replica. That's what he plays. That's what he uses. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but we know what Moyes wanted. So when we were linked to Scamacca, I was thinking, but he's more a Haller. He's not an Antonio. Why are we going for him? And he started off well, all right. And I thought, okay, this is working. And then he fell away because he wasn't the right player for us. Okay, maybe answer. Maybe you're right. He didn't know how to use. Moyes has a certain style of striker that he wants, and Scamacca didn't fit that. Well, it's not Scamacca's fault, I guess. Corky, if it is up to Sully and Brady, they have a great working relationship with Moyes, and he's a safe pair of hands. Sadly, his record does back this up. However, I think he wants a new project and will leave. Everton? Will he go back to Everton? Never know. Robin. Our bench was stronger last season. Moyes has effed up big time this season. For that and many other reasons, Moyes has to go. Stephen. Cole Palmer probably turned us down. He's not over 30 and saw how Moyes treats youngsters. I'm there. Hammer it. Love Antonio's interviews. Proper says how he feels. It's refreshing rather than reading off a mental script. Jonathan. Eddie Howe contract 8th of November until summer 2024. Well, then there is a possibility. Thank you for that. Right, that's it. I've done an hour and 52 reading most of your comments. Thank you very much. Great to be back again, back in the swing of it. We'll be doing more shows again throughout the week, so do look out for that. I've got to do a Fonseca video. I really have to try and explain that. Do hit the like button. Do hit the subscribe button if you're new. As I said, it doesn't cost you anything to become a subscriber, and hit the bell notification to let you know when the next show is on. Got more time on my hands, not going on a European trip. So I've got more time to be doing more shows. So thank you all very much for keeping me on my toes. I do apologize for not being able to put in all your comments. When am I doing a Friday show? Maybe this coming Friday. So look out for that as well. And I'll get some guests on as well. But like I always say, have a wonderful week. At least the weekend didn't completely ruin it for us. A point from Liverpool, I guess, in a way, was a point gained. Not enough for us to make sure about Europe. But that's, let's see what happens against Chelsea this coming weekend. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for commenting. Thank you all for putting in your comments, etc. My apologies if I've not picked out any of your comments. But do have a great week. And I will see you all very, very soon.